Hey mamas, I am so excited for you to hear today's birth story from an amazing mama, Melissa, who shares her experience from birth trauma, postpartum depression, and loss to a beautiful and healing birth. After being told she couldn't receive an epidural for her birth, Melissa shares with us how she prepared for labor and how she used education, preparation, and support to achieve a birth that she was proud of and empowered by. If you are wanting to have an empowering birth experience, education is so important, and I have an online childbirth education course, Built to Birth, that gives you the building blocks to build up your mind, your body, and your team for a healthier, happier, and easier birth. You can access the course through my website, builttobirth.com, which is linked down below in the descriptions. And if you are a mama who is looking for inspiration, healing, or insight in birth, you are going to love Melissa's story. So let's jump into her story right now.
It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Of course. I'm so excited to have you on here and that we all get to hear a little bit of your story. I know that you have some different experiences to share with us, but before we get started, why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I'm Melissa and I am 26 years old. I've been married to my husband for 4 years. We just celebrated 4 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Before that, we dated and were engaged for a total of 3 years. We met in college, so we were college sweethearts.
Aww.
He's my best friend. And we've been through a lot together, which I'm very thankful for, because he is definitely my rock and my best friend, and I'm very thankful to do this life with him. We have a 2-year-old son, Roman. We have a baby in heaven, Shalom. And then we just had our third, Trinity Lee. She was born on May 12th, so she will be officially 1 month tomorrow.
Wow.
And we also have a German Shepherd named Anuska, who is definitely part of our family.
I love it. Aww. Well, sweet. I love it. Well, again, thank you for taking time with us. I know that having a 1-month-old and a 2-year-old, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can be busy. My daughter's almost 2. She'll be 2 in August. So You've got your hands full.
Yes. It's definitely a lot busier than it was with one kid.
Yeah. Do you feel like the transition from 0 kids to 1 kid was harder, or 1 kid to 2 kids was harder?
So for me, transitioning to 1 kid was harder. I had postpartum depression with my first, and so far I haven't had that this time around. And so that definitely, I think, made it a little bit harder to adjust. And I also had some family dynamic stuff going on right after my son was born that made the transition harder. And breastfeeding was hard with him. And just a lot of different variables that all together made it a harder transition. I don't think I left the house by myself with him until he was 3 months old. But this time around, we've already been on walks, and we've just driven around to get out of the house. It's a little bit different because we have the pandemic this time around, as far as we can't necessarily go anywhere or see anybody, but we have like for our anniversary, we went and just did a little nature walk with the kids. And so that was nice to do something.
Yeah, I know. I feel like right now that's every mom just trying to figure out something to do.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've already heard snippets of your story, and so I can't wait to hear a little bit more about each of your stories. But why don't we start with your first birth experience with your firstborn, and share with us a little bit about, how you felt in your pregnancy, as far as what kind of birth you were hoping for, how you prepared, and then your birth experience. Why don't you share like some of the big points of that birth experience?
So honestly, with my first, I didn't prepare for birth. My best friend had a baby 3 months before I did. So about the only preparation I did was I talked to her about, how was it painful and how did it feel and stuff like that. But I didn't work on breathing or watch any videos or really educate myself at all. So I went into it very naive with him. And labor was cool in the fact that my water broke on its own at home before contractions started. So I knew immediately, oh, it's time to go to the hospital, because that, you know, my midwife had said, if your water breaks at home, give us a call and you'll probably come in right away. Yeah. But once we got to the hospital, it took a couple hours before my contractions really started. And at first they were fine. And I was around 4 centimeters when I got to the hospital. But once real active labor really started, I was totally unprepared and I completely lost it mentally. And so the rest of my birth was really difficult because I didn't know how to cope with each contraction, and each contraction was scary. And so just my fear kept building and building. And I have a birth defect called spina bifida occulta, which means I have a hole in my spine. And with him, the anesthesiologist was very hesitant to give me an epidural, but because I was not doing well mentally with the pain, they went ahead and gave me an epidural. And after I had the epidural, I was 8 centimeters, but then it took another 30 minutes to an hour to really kick in before I wasn't feeling any pain anymore. And then I pushed for 2 hours, which was completely exhausting. And after he was born, we did immediate skin to skin, which was amazing. And my favorite part of his birth story is that my husband and I were, you know, saying hi to him and talking to him, and he looked up at both of us, and I was like, oh my goodness, he really does recognize our voices. So that was my favorite part of his birth. But I tore really bad. I had a 3rd-degree tear, and so once the epidural wore off and everything, the pain was just the pain afterwards was very difficult, and it took me a good 8 weeks to recover from that, which also added, I think, to why transitioning from 0 to 1 was the hardest for our family. I just was not in a good place physically and not in a good place emotionally and mentally. So those factors all together just made it really hard to adjust to being a new mom. And so that's how it went with our first.
Yeah. And, you know, I think I love what you were saying about how mentally you lost it, and that the fear just kind of took over and was building, because I think that that's so much of what birth is it's like that mind over matter, and bringing our mental space to a place of like being calm and relaxing, so that our physical reaction does the same. And I feel like that's where so much preparation lies, is in like our mindset, and not even so much our like physical condition. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so I think that's just super powerful, you know, for moms to hear, like, oh wow, you know, it's not like I have to go do 100 push-ups a day and do all these squats, and I don't have to do the perineum massage. It's like a lot of it is mind over matter, and I think that's, I don't know, really powerful. So thank you for sharing that. And you know, I think we do know that there is a correlation between how a woman feels about her birth experience and how she feels about herself postpartum. And do you feel like that there was a relationship between those things when you were in that kind of season of postpartum, and, you know, not being, just being a little bit more emotionally like unstable, you know, not being yourself? Do you feel like that had correlation with your birth experience?
It very well could have, because when I tell my most recent birth story, it's just completely different. And so that correlation would definitely make sense this time around, for sure. And with my firstborn, I had planned to have a midwife, but it just so happened that the day my water broke, there were no midwives on call, and so I ended up having an OB, and he was great, but he he wasn't what I was expecting. And
Yeah.
that was definitely a shock. And then, of course, just because I was just naive and I didn't prepare mentally. Physically, just labor was, honestly, it was traumatic for me.
Yeah.
That's kind of how, that's the word my brain describes it every time. I remember my labor and delivery with my first, as it was traumatic. And I honestly told my husband, I don't want to have any more kids because I can't go through this again. I can't feel like this again. And it was because just I was unprepared mentally for the pain, and I tore, and so my physical recovery afterwards was just a lot longer, and it was more than I was expecting. And then I had the postpartum depression set in. And I didn't have a history of depression prior to my firstborn, and so that was just very, very shocking because I got into a place that I've never been, and it was really scary. And I'm just very thankful for my husband because I told him how I was feeling, and he knew exactly what to do. And he said,
"Wow,
tomorrow we are calling your doctor, and we are going to get you into counseling, and we're going to take care of you." And his work was phenomenal too, as far as giving him time off so that he could help me with all of that stuff. I've been seeing that same counselor for 2 years now. So
that's amazing. I know. I feel like so many stories you hear people being so hesitant about seeing a counselor or a psychiatrist or something, and then once they get started, they're like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. I love this. And they just like, I don't want to ever stop. It's just kind of funny. Like, I feel like that's the general consensus amongst people who do counseling. It's scary at first, and then they end up falling in love with it.
For sure. And I think the key is finding a counselor that you really connect with. Because if you don't connect with your counselor, the therapy isn't going to be as helpful. But I'm just super thankful because the Lord brought the perfect counselor into my life at the perfect time, and I've been seeing her since then.
That's amazing. Well, I'm sure that there are moms who are listening to this and who are going to either struggle with postpartum depression or maybe have struggled with postpartum depression or maybe are currently struggling. What's some like advice or encouragement you would give to them for being in that season?
So I think the hardest part for me with the postpartum depression was I did have suicidal ideation. So I didn't have suicidal thoughts, but I did think about how my husband and my son would be better off if I was no longer alive. And as soon as I had that thought, I told my husband, and that's when he sprung into action. And so I would tell moms that tell somebody who you trust and is going to love you no matter what you say and is going to get you the help that you need. Reaching out for help is so important. And because even though you're feeling that way, it doesn't mean that you don't love your baby. And that was something that was really hard for me to admit to my friends because at the time, I didn't have any friends who had ever experienced postpartum depression. So it was hard for me because I just felt like people probably assume I don't love my son because I'm having to go, I'm going through all of this emotionally and mentally. But I will tell mamas that I know that they love their babies and they are great mamas, even though they are having to deal with this struggle. And it is so important to reach out for help so that you can get the help you need so that you can help your baby, and your baby is going to be so proud of you for getting that help and for tackling the postpartum depression head on. And it's okay if you need help too. So
yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know moms are going to be encouraged by what you have to say to them. So thank you for sharing about that really vulnerable and personal event, that you went through. So thank you for sharing about that, Melissa.
Absolutely. I I didn't pick to go through all of that, but if my story can help a mom who's going through a similar thing, I absolutely want to tell it, because I didn't have anybody to help me through it as far as another mom who had been through it. My husband was great, but
Yeah. And that is hard because regardless, I feel like any mom who's stepping into motherhood for the first time feels a sense of isolation a lot of times, because you're stuck at home with a newborn, you're trying to breastfeed, trying to figure out, formula feeding or whatever. Like you're just, there's so much newness and you feel like you're in it alone. And then to add on top of that, going through postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety or, even the baby blues, which are very different. But it can feel very isolating. And so, like I said, I know this is going to be super encouraging for moms to hear, to ask for help and to accept the help and that they are good mamas. So that's going to be so sweet and encouraging. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about your first birth experience. And I know that between your firstborn and the baby who's 1 month old right now, you did have a miscarriage. Do you want to share about that or?
Yeah. Again, I did not pick to have that experience, but it happened to me, and I want to share my story and Shalom's story so that other moms who've been through something, or even if they have a friend who went through it and they don't really know what to say, just to try to be helpful. And but yeah, so we decided when Roman was a year old that we were going to start trying to have another baby, and we got pregnant right away, which happened with Roman as well. So we were super excited. I was super sick, very nauseous. I even vomited a little bit, and but we were super excited. And the day before my 8-week ultrasound, I just got this overwhelming feeling that something was wrong. And I was telling my husband about it, and he was like, "Well, like, have you had any bleeding? Are you having cramping? Like, why? Like, what's making you have those thoughts, do you think?" And I don't know. I just am really nervous for the ultrasound tomorrow, and I just have a bad feeling that something's wrong. So going into the ultrasound, I was very anxious, and sure enough, when they were doing the ultrasound, my womb was empty. There was no baby to be seen, and I knew right away, because we had already had a kid, that the baby wasn't where the baby was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So thankfully I didn't have an ectopic pregnancy, so the baby didn't implant where the baby wasn't supposed to implant. But what had happened was we had what is called a blighted ovum miscarriage, which means that we did conceive a child. However, the child passed away very early on, but my body didn't register that the child had passed away, and so my body was preparing a womb for the child, and that's preparing all the hormones and everything, and so that's why I still felt so sick, and that's why the pregnancy tests were positive, and it was just very confusing, and it was very heartbreaking, and I just couldn't believe that this was happening to us. And I was so excited for Roman to be a big brother. I'm the oldest of 6, and four of us are very close in age, and so I'm from a big family, and I wanted Roman to have at least one sibling to play around and get into trouble with, as he grows, and to have best friends as an adult, siblings. I just would hope and pray that they would, be best friends growing up and everything. So I was just devastated, and my depression got bad again. That was a big trigger for my depression. And but what we decided with our doctor, we decided to go with the same doctor who delivered our son, because we needed an OB instead of a midwife. And we decided to give my body time to miscarry our baby naturally. However, the doctor explained to us that if the baby, if my body didn't miscarry the child on its own within a couple weeks, that I would be at a risk of developing a cancer in my uterus. I forget exactly what it's called. So that was very scary. So not only had we heard that our baby didn't make it, but here's a
potential risk.
Yeah, exactly. Here's a waiting game of seeing when your body catches on to what happened, and also if it doesn't catch on in time, you have a risk of developing this cancer.
Yeah.
So, but we decided to wait. We had an ultrasound again. I think it was a week and a half later, and the baby still wasn't to be found, but they had said there was a very small chance that maybe I was just really a lot earlier than I had thought I was, but that was not the case. And honestly, I knew it in my heart that wasn't the case. And so we decided that the next day they had an opening for a D&C procedure. And so we decided to go ahead and schedule the D&C, which is a surgery where they remove everything in your womb and the baby after you have a miscarriage. So if your body isn't miscarrying on its own, or if it's just having trouble miscarrying on its own, then they will do that procedure. So that's what we decided to do. And I lost a liter of blood. And so I had a huge complication from that procedure. And so again, the recovery was a lot more than I thought it was going to be. I couldn't drive, I believe, for a whole month. And I needed, honestly, to be watched for the first week, because I would get dizzy and I would pass out. And so not only did my son need to be taken care of, but I also needed to be taken care of until my body started to restore the blood that I had lost.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. And again, thank you for sharing that very vulnerable experience. How did you and your husband heal from that experience? And I'm sure there's still some healing that's going on, but how did you guys kind of move on from that? Not that you move on, but what were your next steps after that point?
Yes. So I did research on books for women who have miscarried, and we are Christians, and so I specifically wanted books that came from a biblical perspective. And so I found this wonderful book called What Was Lost by her last name is Barrett, and it's just a great book that talks about the very many different emotions that you experience after having a miscarriage, sometimes one at a time, sometimes all at once, with anger and depression and sadness and grief and disbelief and, all of the different things. And I just loved the way that she approached the topic, because she did it from a biblical perspective, but she also had did a ton of research as far as like psychological and medically speaking, what happens with your body when you have a miscarriage. And she also interviewed other moms who had miscarried their children. And so just those three viewpoints combined just really helped me cope and get ideas of how to honor our child, because that was another thing we had to decide was, are we going to talk about this child that we didn't get to know? Are we gonna honor his or her memory publicly, or are we gonna try to keep it to ourselves? And I told my husband that I wouldn't be true to myself if I never talked about our child publicly. And so we decided to give our child a name, and we named him or her Shalom Emery. And Shalom means peace, and Emery means brave and powerful. And I made a shadow box of Shalom's ultrasound and Bible verses that just comforted my husband and I after losing him and her. And we ordered this beautiful hand sculptured ornament and it's a little baby on a heart with Shalom's name, and that is hanging up in our living room. And then I also ordered a watercolored painting of Jesus holding a baby, and we also have that hung in our living room. And just having Shalom's memory present where we spend a lot of our time has been very healing for me personally, because I'm acknowledging that experience, and acknowledging that my baby, I did have a baby, even though his or her life was very, very short in the womb. And just a lot of prayer and going to church and getting reconnected with friends. And after I posted on my social media about our miscarriage, I had a couple of old teachers actually who reached out to me and shared their stories. And so that was very helpful. It made me feel like I wasn't alone, and I wasn't the only mama who was grieving this baby, that I had no idea, if the baby was even a boy or a girl. And we also spent time with family as much as we could that summer, and just really tried to spend time with our son and to really enjoy him and the age that he was at. And it's definitely, Shalom is a big part of our pregnancy with our baby that we just had, and was a big part, honestly, of our birth story too. So just the opportunity to talk about Shalom here has been very healing as well.
Well, again, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's so important. I feel like for so many women who deal with, especially really early pregnancy loss, is that there's a part of them that wants to be like, well, nothing, like, it was so early, like, why am I sad about this? Like, I wasn't even, like, I shouldn't have even been connected to this life. Like, it just seems there's a part of you that wants to shut it away and not feel connected. But I think what's important to realize is that you are grieving a lifetime imagined with them, that lifetime of possibility. And that's what you have lost, and that's what you're having to grieve, that even though it was early on, you loved them as much as when they are going to be 100 as you do on that first day you see that pregnancy test. And so I think that's what's so hard, because it's not like you've seen any physical changes. You don't have that belly yet. You haven't, it's not like you have that physical, tangible thing, but you still have that deep connection. And that's why it is so challenging, but so important to honor that life like you did. And I think that's so special, all the ways that you found to heal and to bring remembrance into that experience with your baby. And so thank you for sharing that. And I think for any woman who does deal with miscarriage, finding ways to be educated and find healing in whatever way that looks like is so important, and sharing that with, loved ones and people who you trust and connect with, because otherwise it's, again, a very isolating experience if you don't share with people that very big life event.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And, you said that Shalom's life deeply impacted your birth experience with your newest addition. So I can't wait to hear that story. Why don't we hop into your experience finding out you were pregnant again? I'm sure that was kind of an emotional roller coaster as well. So why don't we start from there?
So my husband, we listened to my doctor's recommendation on when he thinks my body would be ready to start trying. And he recommended to wait, 3 cycles once my body started having periods again. So that's what we did. However, after my 3rd cycle, I was just terrified. And I told my husband, I don't know if I can do this again. I am scared. I'm scared to try. I'm scared to give my body another chance to have a baby, because honestly, one of the biggest things I struggled with after our miscarriage was that I just felt so betrayed by my own body. That my own body, you know, had the opportunity to care for this child and wanted to, but it just didn't happen. So I just honestly felt like I couldn't trust my body to have another baby. So we had many discussions about living, not out of fear, but living in faith. And, you know, my husband was like, do you want another child? And I was, of course I want another child. And he's like, well, then I think we should start trying. So we started trying, and right before, though, I was doing the dishes, and I had this vision of 2 children playing in our yard, and one was Roman, and the other, I just knew that child was our child. And after that, I felt a lot of peace, and I didn't feel as scared about trying. So between talking to my husband and having that vision, I thought, okay, all right, I can't live in this fear. And, you know, so we started trying, and we got pregnant right away again, which I know we're very blessed to be able to do that. And so I didn't even tell my husband that I thought I was pregnant. I was kind of having the feeling as it got closer to when my cycle should have started. I was like, I just feel like this might be it. But I was afraid to tell him, and I was afraid to get his hopes up that I had a suspicion that we were pregnant. And so I woke up one morning, and I took the test, and I didn't even look at it. I went back to bed after I took the test, and I just kept it in the bathroom, and didn't look at it until I woke up for the day. Because on the weekends, my husband lets me sleep in, so he wakes up with Roman, so I can sleep in. And so when I finally got up for the day, I went into the bathroom, and I looked at the test, and it said positive. And so I brought it out on a washcloth into our living room where my husband was playing with our son. And I said, honey, I need you to look at this. And he was very confused. Like, why are you bringing a washcloth to the living room? And he looked at it, and he went, oh, is that what I think it is? And I was like, yes. And he's like, you didn't even tell me you were going to take a test. I said, I know. So he was ecstatic, and I was excited, but I was also very nervous and very, very hesitant to get too excited and too attached. So I took one more a couple days later, and it came back positive. And so I went ahead and, you know, scheduled the appointment and everything. And going into that ultrasound again was very nerve-wracking, but I didn't have a bad feeling. It was just, I don't want the same thing to happen again. But thankfully the baby looked beautiful. The baby was exactly where she was supposed to be, and she had a strong heartbeat and everything like that. But because we had lost Shalom, and I was so devastated by that, I honestly don't think it really set in my brain that we were truly going to have another baby until my 3rd trimester. And until, you know, we had multiple ultrasounds at that point, and the baby was healthy every time. And we had multiple appointments where we heard the baby's heartbeat. And when I could start feeling her move, definitely helped calm some of those fears, because now I was like, okay, I have a way that I myself can monitor that she's okay. I don't have to wait a couple weeks in between finding out if she's still okay. And so feeling her move brought me a lot of comfort. But again, it wasn't really until I was in my 3rd trimester before I was like, okay, this is really happening. We're going to have a 2nd child. So.
Wow. So at that 3rd trimester mark, was that when you started thinking more about your birth experience, or were you thinking about it a little bit beforehand, or kind of walk us through that?
So a little bit of both, because I did not enjoy Roman's birth, and then obviously having a miscarriage. People I didn't think about it as a form of birth until it actually happened to me. But miscarriage is a form of birth. And so my first 2 births were not how I had wanted them to be. And so I thought, okay, I need to do something different, because it definitely didn't work with Roman, just going in there winging it. And I actually switched providers in the middle of my pregnancy this time around. And so they had a completely different protocol for handling my spina bifida occulta. And so they had told me I needed to have an anesthesia consult just to make sure. They said, you had one with your first, so I'm sure it'll be fine. So I have my anesthesia consult, and they asked for x-rays of my spine. And so I said, I don't have any x-rays of my adult spine, but I will reach out to my parents. And well, my parents don't have any x-rays even from when I was diagnosed originally as a child.
Wow.
So the anesthesia consult said, okay, well, without x-rays, we're not going to authorize an epidural. And obviously you can't get x-rays right now because you're pregnant. So I was like, oh my goodness, not only am I going to go through birth again, but I can't have an epidural this time.
Yeah.
And I was like, I really need to prepare for this birth.
Yeah.
So I reached out to all my friends who've had babies, and I asked them if they've ever had an unmedicated birth and what they did and what helped them. And some of them gave me some tips from like amber jewelry to, different positions and stuff like that. And I also did research on essential oils, and I found you and your videos on YouTube, and I watched a ton of them and just really educated myself on what a contraction is, why it's painful, different ways to measure progress with birth. I loved your letting go of fear meditation videos, and my husband enjoyed the how to be a supportive birth partner, and we just watched so many of your videos and really educated ourselves on, okay, we've been through this before, but we're really gonna get a hold of this, and we are gonna get in the mindset that we can do this without an epidural. And I also asked all of our friends and family to pray that my labor would be really quick and that I would be able to do it without medication. Because shortly after I found out I couldn't have the epidural is when the COVID-19 pandemic started. And so then the hospital changed their policies and were no longer offering laughing gas to laboring women. And so my pain medication option was narrowed down to one IV pain medication, fentanyl. And I had tried an IV pain medication, Stadol with Roman, and I did not like it. And so I just was like, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it all the way. And I'm going to pray, and I'm going to prepare that I can do this completely without medication. That way, I don't even have to see if the IV medication helps or not. Because if it doesn't, there's no more options. I also have an aunt who is a labor and delivery nurse, and so I called and talked to her too about, my experience with Roman and, how she thought I could prepare, and I just followed her advice about educating myself and breathing techniques. That was another video that I watched of yours over and over. Is the different breathing techniques. And my husband and I, like the last month of my pregnancy, we were going on a walk almost every day with Roman. And we live in a very hilly part of Virginia. And so our walks have lots of hills. So I would practice my breathing going up those hills.
You go, girl.
My husband was like, you're doing great and stuff. And, he helped me practice. He would name a breathing technique, and then I would, do it.
Great. That's a great idea for practicing. I love it.
And it was really cute too, because Roman would, he would practice with us.
Yes. That's so cute. Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and I packed like a separate little essential oil labor bag with all of the essential oils I wanted to use during labor. And
which essential oils did you pack?
Oh, I packed a ton. I packed frankincense and lavender and peace and calming and valor and clary sage.
I love it.
And geranium. So I packed a ton. And I wrote down for my husband all the oils and color coded and gave him directions about, okay, this is the oil I might want to use in this situation, and this is how you apply it and stuff like that. And we went over it beforehand so that he, wouldn't be flustered in the moment. So that's how we were prepared this time.
So a lot more preparation for this experience than for your first. So with that preparation that you had, share with us like the big parts of your newest birth story.
Yes. So about a week before my due date, I woke up in the middle of the night with cramping, and I didn't want to get too excited because I was late with my first, and so I kind of just assumed I'd be late this time around. Tried to go back to sleep, couldn't for a whole hour, and at that point I woke my husband up and was like, hey, I need you to time contractions for me. So he did, and after another hour, we decided to go ahead and call our babysitter to come over, and we called the hospital and everything, and the hospital said, well, with COVID, why don't you give your body another hour, and if you're still having this cramping contraction feeling that are getting closer together, like, go ahead and come on in. Well, sure enough, shortly after our babysitter got here, the contraction stopped completely.
Oh, no.
Completely. And so I was so embarrassed and so angry. I thought this was happening. I was ready. Mentally, I was ready. So I had some false labor about a week before my due date. Well, my due date comes around, and no sign of her coming anytime soon. So at my 40-week appointment, I was 3 centimeters, and so the midwife was like, your body's thinking about going into labor, so I'm going to strip your membranes for you, and 50% of moms go into labor within 48 hours of this. And so I was super excited because, honey, we're having a baby in the next couple days.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't come. So we started doing, natural stuff at home to try to jumpstart labor. We watched that video of yours. And I was just really hoping that I wouldn't make it to 41 weeks because they had said if I do make it to 41 weeks, we'd have to do a non-stress test and an ultrasound and think about induction. And I've had a couple of friends who have been induced, and that was definitely a scary concept for me to think about, is being induced. Well, my 41-week mark came along, and she wasn't here. So I went in and got all that testing done, and that time I was 4 centimeters.
Oh my goodness.
And the midwife said, your body really is ready. So it might just need some help getting started. So she said, how does tomorrow work for you to come in and have a baby? I said, okay, but does that mean, I'm being induced? And she said, yes, if your baby doesn't come, if your body doesn't start labor before tomorrow morning, you'll be induced. She said, however, I think your body's favorable enough that I'd be willing to break your water first and give your body an hour after that to try to catch up that, hey, it's time to have this baby. And then if that doesn't work, well, then we'll start talking about using Pitocin. So I said, okay. So this time I got in the car and told my husband we're actually truly having a baby either today or tomorrow. So we kind of just took the day to really, spend time with Roman. Our last day is a family of 3, and make sure we had everything packed and everything. And going to bed that night was like, okay, am I going to wake up in the middle of the night, or are we going to wake up early in the morning to go into the hospital? So we had to go into the hospital. So we got there around 7:45 and started check-in. And finally, because of COVID and everything, I had to be tested for COVID, and that took about an hour to get my results back. And until then, I had to wear a mask, which was a little bit of a surprise. I had thought that they weren't making laboring moms wear a mask. So I was a little bit caught off guard when they said, no, you have to wear a mask until your test comes back. But thankfully my test came back negative, and so I could take my mask off, and I'm very thankful for that because I was getting pretty anxious. That first like it was an hour or 2 hours because they didn't do the test right away. They started the check-in process before they actually tested me. So I was getting pretty anxious, and so I had my husband apply the first round of oils and everything like that. So but then finally my test came back, and so then they're like, all right, let's start thinking about actually getting this induction going. And they put in my IV, and we do the cord blood banking, so they had to draw blood and stuff like that. So finally, around 9:50 in the morning, the midwife came in and checked me and broke my water, and I was 5 centimeters at that point.
Wow.
And I had felt a few contractions, but nothing like, oh, this is it. You know what I mean? So she broke my water, and she told me, I'll give you an hour and we'll reevaluate then. So my husband and I had to be on the monitors for the baby's heartbeat for 20 minutes out of every hour because I was induced. So after that first 20 minutes, we got up and we walked around the ward. We did have to wear masks out in the hallway, but it was okay. And my contractions started on their own after my water broke. So within that first hour, they were starting to get, like
kick into
my
gear,
my body's not messing around. Exactly. So by the end of our walk, because I believe we walked for 40 minutes, I told my husband, I said, we need to stay in the room because they're starting to get pretty uncomfortable. I don't want to be out in the hallway, and I don't want to have the mask on anymore. So, I got hooked up to the monitors again for 20 minutes, and that was difficult because I was having contractions, and it was hard to get in a comfortable position with all the wires and everything on me. But for that part of my labor, what was most comfortable was swaying with my husband, and did a couple squats and stuff like that. And I buried my head in his chest, and sometimes I'd squeeze his neck. But then also before my water broke and labor started, my husband went ahead and put on the labor and delivery playlist I had made, and also started diffusing frankincense and lavender. So we had the room, set up with that stuff as well. So after that, I tried the rocking chair, which I didn't try with Roman, and that felt good. Surprisingly, at first I was kind of like, I don't know, this seems kind of silly, but it felt really good, and that is when I got into the zone. And my contractions were getting closer together, and they were still strong, and I felt very weak in my arms and legs, which was it was a very odd sensation, trying, like, I wanted to be standing because that felt the best, but then I felt so weak. So that was very odd, but that's when the midwife suggested the rocking chair. And so that's what I did. And she brought me some peanut butter crackers and ginger ale to kind of give myself some sustenance. And she drew up the jacuzzi bath for me while I kind of just enjoyed the rocking chair for a little bit and took a little breather. And I got in the zone. So that's kind of when I stopped being verbal with my husband, very like one word kind of answers and stuff like that. And peanut butter crackers and ginger ale have never tasted so amazing.
I believe it.
So after after a little bit of time in the rocking chair, I got in the bath after it was ready. And we couldn't figure out how to do the jets, the jacuzzi jets. The midwife had already left. So I just sat in the warm water in the jacuzzi tub and held my husband's hand. He sat on the outside of the tub, so he wasn't in the tub with me. But he sat on the outside and held my hand, and he would breathe through the contractions with me. And he was telling me I was doing a good job. And once I was in the tub, that's when I really started to try to like imagine myself like in other places and just try to ride each contraction. And so it helped focusing on some of the lyrics of the songs that were playing in the background. It helped to focus on my husband's breathing when he was breathing with me. It helped to envision Trinity Lee being born and finally holding a child in my arms after everything that had happened with our family. And so, but after the first 20 minutes, the labor and delivery nurse came in and checked on us, and she was like, "Why aren't the jacuzzi jets on?" And we couldn't figure them out. And so she turned the jets on for us. So I had another 20 minutes in the tub with the jets. Okay. And that felt amazing, but that was also the hardest part of my labor was those 20 minutes because my contractions quickly went from being really, really strong and a little bit apart to very, very strong and very close together. Yeah. And there were a few contractions where I was starting to kind of like, not scream, but just kind of like moan and like kind of thrash around because I just, was not doing the best job of breathing through those ones. And my husband would just very gently, remind me to breathe and that I was doing great and that our baby girl was almost here. And so that helped. His encouragement helped a lot. I'm sure. And squeezing his hand a ton helped. And towards the end, not only would I squeeze his hand, but I'd like squeeze it and like shake it. Like
whatever you got to do.
Yes. So they had told us that when the jets went off, it was time to go back on the monitors. Well, I was, my contractions were very, very strong and very close together. And I was like, there's no way I can just like sit or lay for 20 minutes on the monitors. I said, so honey, I think I need the IV medication. Of course, I didn't use that many words because I was in the zone, but I was like, I need pain medication. And so my husband was like, okay, I can ask when they come back. And there was a few contractions where I was saying, this needs to be over. This needs to be over. And he would say, it's almost over. You're doing great. Well, when the jets turned off, I almost started crying because I was like, no, I have to get out of the bath. The bath feels so good. Oh, no. So the nurse and my husband helped me out of the tub, and I was just in, a lot of pain, but I still had it together mentally, which definitely helped because the few contractions where I was starting to lose it mentally, those hurt worse. Whereas, even though the other contractions, were unpleasant, it was more doable when I was breathing through them and I was imagining the different things when I was focusing on the different things. So getting out of the tub was not very fun. And the nurse was like, do you feel like you need to push? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what feeling like I need to push feels like because I didn't feel that with my first. The epidural had already kicked in at that point. So she was like, well, let's get you on the bed and the midwife will check you. And so that's what we did. And I was so afraid that she was going to check me and say, oh, you're 6 or 7 centimeters. I was so afraid because that had happened a couple of times with Roman, where my contractions are very strong and very painful, but they checked me and I was either the same or had only, opened up 1 more centimeter or something like that. So I had that in the back of my mind and I was like, oh no. But she checked me and my midwife was phenomenal. She's just like so soft spoken and calm. And she was like, Melissa, you are at 10 centimeters and you're ready to push, honey. You did it. You did it. And so I was just like shocked. And my husband started crying. He's like, I'm so proud of you. This is it. And so, I pushed for about 15 minutes, and then she was born.
Wow.
And she was on my chest, and we were doing skin to skin. And, I had no idea what time it was or how long it had been, but it had been just under 3 hours from
oh my goodness,
when my midwife broke my water and I was holding her in my arms.
So quick. Wow.
Yes. So it was
so you got what you were hoping for.
Exactly. It was such an answer to prayer that she came so quickly, and that I was able to do it unmedicated, because even though I got to that point where I was requesting the pain medication, my body was already to the point where it was, too late. It was time to push,
And honestly, that's when every mom asks for medication. Like I was so adamant about like not having medication, and I got to a point in transition, like you were in transition or about to push. And even I was like, maybe I need medication. So like every mom gets to that point where you're just like, yes. Can I keep doing this? Because I don't think I can.
Right, exactly.
So that's amazing that you were able to accomplish that. And how was your experience postpartum, after having that experience?
Yeah. So,
well, I guess you are postpartum now. So
yes.
How are you experiencing postpartum life right now? Just really quickly.
Yeah, of course. So it's been just night and day, honestly. I have been so just filled with pure joy, honestly. And I've enjoyed the newborn stage, even though it's hard, don't get a lot of sleep. Baby cries, you're still trying to figure out how they're communicating, what their cries mean and stuff. But I've just really enjoyed it. And I've been really thankful for the late night snuggles and, just been really trying to enjoy feeding her so often, and, her wanting to be close to me and wanting to be held. And so it was really cool in the hospital, even after she was born, because I was up and walking around within 2-3 hours after having her, and I was fully alert. And my husband and I, she was born at 12:42 in the afternoon, so we had the rest of the day to kind of reflect and enjoy each other and call family and all of that stuff. Whereas after I had Roman, I passed out because I was exhausted from pushing for 2 hours. So I was checked out with him for the first couple hours. As far as I slept because my body had been through so much. But even though my body, had just given birth, I was alert and just super excited. And I know some of the moms you've already interviewed have said it for themselves too, but my husband and I we really reconnected after a hard, busy season of our life, after becoming parents and having a miscarriage. And my husband has very demanding jobs, and so after all of that, labor and delivery just brought us together and just reconnected us in a way that is it's hard to even express with words, because it's just so special and so intimate. And we've already thought of, not truly thinking about having more kids, but we've talked about it, and the concept isn't as scary as it was after Roman and after Shalom, because postpartum has been a lot smoother. I did tear again, but my recovery has been it hasn't been as painful. Like I said earlier, we've already been on walks, and I kind of knew what to expect, so also wasn't such a shock with the postpartum care of my physical body, and emotionally, just giving birth honestly has lifted me from depression, at least for right now. And because even during my pregnancy, I went through a lot of I call them little pits of depression, and so. It's just been truly amazing, and just God has answered so many of our prayers and has been so faithful in how everything lined up between childcare and having her, and despite COVID and despite my previous experiences, it's just been truly night and day. And yes, it's overwhelming to take care of 2 kids who are 2 and a newborn. But it's the kind of overwhelming that I know is going to end. It's not the kind that feels like we'll be here forever, if that makes sense. And again, I've just really enjoyed a lot of aspects of caring for a newborn that just I didn't with my first because of my emotional state. And so I'm just so thankful.
Well, it sounds like your most recent birth experience was very healing, and brought a lot of joy. And I think that, that every birth experience has the potential to do that. And I think people hearing your story is going to really inspire them to prepare and trust the process and trust their body and their baby and, their partner. And so I just think it's a very inspirational story, hearing very different experiences with each baby and just seeing your joy now. And it just shows how impactful birth experiences are. So thank you so much, Melissa, for sharing all of your stories with us. Before we end our call, what's one thing that you would share with mamas in general, not necessarily about one thing, but what's one thing that if you could tell every single mama, what would it be?
That it is possible to have a positive birth experience, even if your previous experiences have made you believe otherwise. And like, I love how you said that it's been healing, because that's the perfect way to describe having our baby girl. It just going in prepared. It really was healing, and I'm just so thankful because the whole process has been different from previous, and it's been joyful. And I never thought that I would ever describe, childbearing as joyful.
Yeah. Wow, that's so powerful. And again, thank you. I know I've said that 100 times, but seriously, thank you for sharing each of your experiences with us. They are so powerful, and keep enjoying this newborn stage. And you are an inspiration. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule with a 2-year-old and a newborn to share with us. So best of luck, Mom, and I'm so glad that we've connected, and I'll be looking out for you in the future, and hopefully we'll stay connected.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Bye, Melissa.
Bye.
Mama, you are already the best mama for your baby and deserve such high praise, whether you're still awaiting your birth or you're chasing little ones around already. I hope Melissa's story of overcoming trauma and fear to experience joy and healing makes you so excited to experience a positive birth. Birth is such an impactful and transformative experience, and being educated about it can mean the difference between a positive or negative impact. So again, if you want to be equipped and empowered through education about your birth experience, check out the Built to Birth online childbirth course to help you have a happier, healthier, and easier birth experience. Mama, you are built to grow, birth, and nourish your baby, and no one can do it better than you. So thanks for being with me in this one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, mamas.